Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another one of my weekly wrap-ups. This one is week 32 of 2022 and boy, do we have some books to talk about, y'all. We have some books to talk about. So it was funny though, I was filling out my notes for this as I do. Like I said, I always have my Chromebook in front of me that has my notes on each book, so that I can recall what I read. And I only read 8 books this week, which felt like so much less than what I read during the Romance Takeover Readathon, which granted, that's what a readathon is for. It did its job. It got me reading a lot. But also I really did stuff that TBR with smaller books to just keep me pumping through them. And this week I may have only read 8 books, but 5 of the 8 were all over 400 pages, and all of them but one were books I had to physically read. There was no companion audiobook for them because a lot of them are arcs. Oh boy, yeah, we got some stuff to talk about. If you can tell from the thumbnail, I read a pretty big arc. It's going to be this book's going to be big, but I also got to read some other very anticipated arcs, so it was interesting. So when I was filling it out, I was like, you know, this may be one of the lower weeks I've had, but the quality, number one, as well as the amount of reading there was still very high. So yeah, we're just gonna dive into these. As always, I want to thank my patrons and channel members for supporting me and making it possible for me to do this full time, for me to be able to, you know, do the things I want to do during the summer, be with my friends, do that stuff, and also be able to read some of the best books out there and bring them to you. So thank you so much. And if you're interested in supporting this channel in any way to help me keep going, you can check out the links down below to do that. Also, I want to call attention to, you know, Hawkeye viewers will notice I did change my setup behind me and a little bit down here. I put my Sea of Ruin out. I have a book haul coming this week sometime. I'm not sure which day it will be out, but I'm going to be going to stay with my sister for a couple days, so, you know, I pre-filmed some videos, which are available right now for channel members if you want to check that out. But I finally hauled some of these books, so I was able to put them up. Like my alternative Sophie Larks, which she sent me, are beautiful. And, well, there's some other new releases, but we're going to talk about them in this video. But then, yeah, I also have my Mystic Box Pam Godwin that is just absolutely gorgeous. So I had to do some shuffling around, and I didn't want to split up my Sophie Larks, but then I decided, I'm like, literally, I can have both J.T. Geisinger and Sophie Lark on the shelf. It's fine. The rest, they're all hanging out together over there. But anyway, okay, let's get into these. I'm sure I'll still be able to talk for an hour when it's about 8 books instead of 13. I know that I can. So the first one I read was just a little like palette cleanser, and it was called Liberty Falls by Lee Jacquot. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but I read this author's book Four Leaf that came out earlier this year, and it's actually a novella length, and they all have some like different kinks in them, but they're still, the stories are not dark, even though like the Four Leaf had kind of like a creepy cover to it, or like a spookier cover, but it was a friends to lovers book. It's just that they were into primal kink, but they're friends, so there was no like, you know, there wasn't anything scary involved. This book is kind of a friends, but they're rivals, but like they're friends basically at the same time. They've grown up in the same town, and the heroine is the chief of police in town, and the hero is the fire captain. And this book actually starts where they're at the county fair, and they have dueling funnel cake booths, and they do a lot of bets and competitions with each other, you know, betting different silly things, and they bet that whoever made the most money gets to have whatever they want from the other person, like whichever team brings in the most money for charity. Like that's the kind of thing that they do. And this time, this competition boils over, and the whatever I want from you is of the sexual nature. They have both been wanting to get in bed with the other person. And some of the kinks that are mentioned in this one, the hero is very much into sensory play. So he likes to be able to like blindfold, handcuff, like put music in someone's ear so they literally can't hear anything but like feel. And there's a mention of even like fire play gets mentioned, which is super cool, but then like we didn't get to see it and I was sad, but they did use like that. There's a certain kind of like happy time wax, you know, or pleasure time wax that like it's a candle that the wax is actually massage oil, which is super cool. So you can be melting it and then you can pour the wax on your partner and it turns into oil, so you can do like a sensual massage. So this was really cute. I know cute's a weird thing to say, but it's pretty short. It was only 110 pages and I really loved a lot of the kinks we talked about, but we didn't get to do them, which was kind of a bummer. Like we did the wax, that's oil, and then in the epilogue of this novella, they mentioned that they've done fire play, because there are ways to safely do fire play with a partner. And I kind of wonder whether like the author was just unsure about how to write that, and so they mentioned that they did, which is fine. It's obviously that is a dangerous kink to have, and I could understand the author being like, we're not going to go that intense, but I would have liked to see it because I've never read a book with fire play. I know there are a few. Willow Winters has one, but anyway, it was cute. I gave it 4 stars. It was a 3 on the spice scale because, again, there was a lot of game talked, but not a lot of follow through. Okay, then I will just quickly talk about a book that I have loved talking about that I did a reread for, because we're going to talk about the upcoming book. But I reread Between Wrath and Mercy now. I had started rereading this last week because this was a book that a patron wanted annotated, which it's a bit bigger than what I like to do for annotations, but I let them have it because I wanted to reread this before Between Despair and Hope before I read it. And if the patron wouldn't have picked this book, because yeah, this is a lot to have to go through a second time, if they wouldn't have picked it, I probably wouldn't have. And I know that my experience reading Between Despair and Hope was greatly amplified by rereading this book. And so I loved it. This book I have as a 6-star on my list. Now, I have shared, and if you were watching my videos when I read this, I originally gave this like 4.5, 5 stars. And then the more that I talked about it, the more people I recommended it to, I put this on my favorites list because it was really unique to me. I love the age of the characters, the situation, this fantasy world, the mythology she chose to use and is inventing. I just loved all of it. And so though there are a few things that aren't, perfect about it, which again, which book is, it's not that I'm hunting for perfection. It's just that I'm tougher on fantasy romance than I am on anything else. Okay, I am. I know this because it's my favorite subgenre of romance. It's my favorite. So I have high standards. I have high hopes for it, right? So there are things that I'm looking for. This provides most all of them, and especially on this reread. Yes, the first half of this book is very backstory heavy, but we're getting right into what's happening with it. And I remember that when I reread it, right? Because I had to not skim any part of this when I'm annotating a book for a patron. I'm reading everything so that I can comment on it and provide something great for my patron who's paid for me to read this, And there were just a lot of things I picked up on a reread that were very helpful when I got into it. So yeah, this book is big. And speaking with Jess, the audiobook for this one probably won't be here till January of 2023, which I thought it would be sooner. But I believe Podium is doing her audiobook and it got pushed back. So it got pushed back. So it won't be until January 2023. But then they're hoping that Between Despair and Hope will be only like a month or 2 later that you get that. And that's okay, because the series is going to be 4 books. She says that right in this one. It isn't a shock. I know not every, people are like, oh, it's a trilogy or whatever. I'm like, no, it's supposed to be 4. we get introduced to a lot. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. This was a 6-star book. I loved rereading it. Y'all know that I love it. It is a second chance romance between these two. It is a mother who her daughter and her husband disappear early in this book. They go on a trip together, like a father-daughter thing, and they end up getting attacked and taken. And so the heroine, who she's been hiding away for many years, like since she found out that her daughter is possibly this very special, like, chosen one, and her twin sister, the heroine Emma, was this chosen one for their generation, and she was killed for being that, and so she doesn't want that to happen to her daughter, so she has been hiding her, but people found out. So Emma has to go back to the childhood love of her life, Prince Rainier, and ask him to help her get her daughter back. And Rainier has never stopped wanting her, or wanting to be with her, and he would never turn her down for helping her get her daughter back. So there's no cheating that happens in this book. I won't tell you how, but as I've said, there's no cheating. And though this is going to be a 4-book series, the emotional, like, will they, won't they, is settled in this book. But as I'm going to talk about in the next one here, there are other couples we're getting introduced to. There are other relationships we'll learn along the way. So think Throne of Glass in that way, which is funny because I'm reading Empire of Storms right now. Like, there are relationships that are getting introduced that will keep you interested. And I'm so interested in the plot and where this is going that that's what you get into fantasy romance for, you know? Like, there's a lot more that goes with it. So then I had gotten the arc for this like 4 days before. Like, we were still doing the Romance Takeover readathon, and Jess dropped the arc early. And I was like, no, I haven't finished rereading this one yet. So I had to ignore it. Even though people were starting to read it right away, I was like, I gotta ignore this. But then I was able to start Between Despair and Hope. Pretty much as soon as I finished this, I immediately jumped into it. And it took me just a little over 24 hours. Like, I read almost half of it one day, and then I finished it the next day. And, oh man, it's so hard to talk about a second book in the series. But what I will say, okay, so we're left with, you know, you're left with the cliffhanger at the end of this one. And we pick up immediately after. We find out what the, like, consequences of a big battle that happened. Well, it's not a huge battle, but like a scuffle that we're having, our first, like, you know, armed conflict. We found out a bunch more of, like, and I don't want to spoil stuff for the first book, but we find out more of the entities involved in what's going on. We're finding out what the overall, like, conflict of this world is going to be. We're introduced to more people, and we get more POV characters. So this book is completely Emma's point of view, except for one chapter at the end is in Rain's point of view. And then when we start Between Despair and Hope, we get 6 point of views. And I don't want to tell you who those are, but I will say, like, Rain and Emma are 2 of them, and 2 of their, like, friends / like, there's someone's sibling too gets it. And then there's 2 characters that I definitely don't want to tell you their POVs, because if you haven't read this one, it would definitely spoil that. But I really liked all of them. I particularly loved Rain's point of view. And the second book, it does still mostly focus on Rain and Emma's point of view. Like, I would say their POVs, between the 2 of them, their POVs are like 70%. We still very much are focusing on, you know, like I said, they are firmly together at the end of this book. But there are some things that have physically separated them from each other, if that makes sense. And so we're working through that. And then there's still some things that are unsettled because they are together, but they hadn't been together for, you know, 16 years, and they're relearning each other, and they're also trying to figure out, you know, what kind of couple they're going to be, and, you know, all of that. So this one was definitely a 5-star. I probably won't make the second one a 6-star as well, but I do say that it is on par and amazing. Like, as I've said, this was a special 6-star case for me. There are things you can pick apart. There are always going to be. But you guys know I'm an emotional-based person, and the emotions that this book took me through, second chance romances are something I love, and I know not everyone does. And we're going to talk about second chance romance again in just a minute here, because boy, do we have more to talk about with that. But I just want to make it clear, I loved this second entry. This one, now I'm trying to think, what is like the, because obviously there's like a cliffhanger at the end of this one too, right? But it wasn't the same level of a cliffhanger that like this one was. So yeah, highly recommend. And Jess has, okay, there's a couple other things I'll say too. Number one, I hopefully will have announced this already, but if not, like, it's not a secret. I just haven't made the, like, I haven't designed the announcement yet. But Jess is actually going to be on my channel for an author hangout. Yes, I am finally bringing author hangouts back. There was just, like, it got delayed a little bit. There was some authors that I was very much trying to get, and then I didn't hear from them, or it was the wrong time for them. And I love this, by the way. Don't take this as me disparaging any other creators, because I love it. But author interviews have like really popped up in the romance community, and I love that because the reason I started them, okay, number one, I wanted to talk to my favorite authors so that I could become pals with them and hear tidbits and know things. And for some authors that has worked out so well for me. Also, I've had some of my dream authors I've gotten to talk to, and it's been amazing, right? But also a big part of it was smaller indie authors. I wanted them to get attention. Like, if there was authors that I could bring something to them, me as a creator, by having them in front of you guys, by having them, you know, be able to talk about their process or why they love romance. That's what the purpose was for me. So, you know, I've had some people say, they're like, oh, well, I feel like you started this. Or I did not start author interviews. You know, like, I did not start that. That's not unique to me. I feel like I made it more like I showed people that it could be easy and didn't have to be complicated and could be fun to do. And that's really opened it up for people, you know, and I very much encouraged a lot of newer creators. I was like, just reach out to authors, because the indie authors specifically, they are doing everything they can to get their name out there, you know, and all it takes, right, is for a video to go viral, or for you to really love a book they've written, for it to all mix together and for them to explode, okay? Like, again, sorry that this is a tangent, but I know you guys will appreciate it. And I bring this up just because I read Sophie's books and I'd never spoken to them. I just kept seeing them and I was like, I like Mafia, let me read it. And I wasn't even totally sold on like the first 2 or 3 books that I read. I was just like, these are okay, this is fun. Well, I did really like Stolen Air, but like I kind of liked the first one, really loved the second one, didn't really love the next, you know, like it was a thing. And then I had one that I loved, and it changed everything, you know, and then I started having a relationship with this author, and then I was like, I want to talk to you, please come on my channel, you know, and that's been a relationship I've had for 1.5 years now, because I was so nervous, but I was like, I'm just going to ask, because if she says no, it's not like anyone's going to know, you know. Anyway, I know that I stepped out, but my point being, I'm so happy that other friends of mine and other creators have really been interviewing authors and had them on their channels and done that. And again, well, I by no means came up with this idea, so please don't ever think that someone is like copying me or doing whatever. And I'm only mentioning this because I've had a few people message me about it, because I haven't done any author interviews since, I mean, I think JT was the last one. It was either her or Jennifer Ashley was the last one. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And it's not because I was feeling butthurt because other people were doing them. It's because I, number one, couldn't get in touch with a few of the authors I really wanted to. And number two, going through this like job transition, I just hadn't been reaching out to people. I was kind of, you know, emotionally defunct for a little while. You know, I was having a bit of like ups and downs, and I just hadn't been reaching out. But I got kind of a kick in the butt a couple weeks ago, and I reached out to an author, which I will mention them in a second. Not Jess, but there was another author that I've been really wanting to interview, and she hadn't gotten back to me. And so then I was feeling sad about it again. Well, the reason this author didn't get back to me is like they were busy, and they don't check their social as much as we do, right? So they didn't see. And just the other day, she got back to me and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I missed this. Jen, I would love to come on your channel. And I was like, oh my God. So it just spurred me back in. And so I was like, who are the other people I've been wanting to interview? And Jess is someone I have been wanting to interview, but I wanted to wait until Between Despair and Hope was done. She was done writing it, because I follow her TikTok and Instagram, and I know how hectic it's been and how much more pressure there was for this second book after this book has been so successful for her. And I understand that stuff now, having more author friends. So this, you know, her book is like done. Yes, she's going to be promoting it, but like she's done writing it and she's taking a break before writing the next book. And so she's going to be on my channel September 3rd. So I'm very excited. So you will have time, hopefully, to read both books by then, or at least read the first one, because the first half of it, like, there's not going to be any like spoilers or anything. We're just going to talk about, you know, like I do on author hangouts, just about what got them into writing and what inspired them and everything. So anyway, long story short with that. The other author that I will have on, and this is the author that I was really, really wanting to talk to her, is Stacy Reed. Stacy Reed just puts a huge smile on my face whenever I think of her. And she'd been busy, and actually her and her husband are going to be like moving, and so she's not going to be on until October. She'll be on October 8th, and you know, I'll have my normal gal pals will be on that with me, because we all adore her books. So if she's someone you've been wanting to read, you definitely have time. You know, you have like 2 months to catch up to that, but those are going to be some author interviews coming soon. So now that I've wasted 10 minutes talking about upcoming stuff, let's move on to some other books that I read. So another book I'd been highly anticipating, and I didn't have an arc for this book or the next one actually, but they just came out, and that's fine. As you can tell, I've had enough arcs to read. So I read Chosen by a Sinner by Michelle Hurd. This is book 4 in the Sinner series. This one is Luca and Mariah. Sorry, I need my notes again. I put my notes aside since I was ranting about that. Yeah, so this is Luca and Mariah, and they are, so this one's interesting. This one connects the most to her other series, because this is children of books in other series, so just know that. I know there is like something Salvation, what is it? Tears of Salvation, which is the book that's in the Underworld Kings. That's the parents of the woman in here. And then Luca, who is now the head of the Italian Mafia, his parents were in a different book too. And like their parents are actually friends. So Luca, he is actually like his, one way or the other, like I think his parents are Mariah's godparents. I think that's how it is. I don't know. But either way, they've been friends for a while, but she sees him as kind of like antagonistic. And the thing is, Luca's been playing it cool. He's been wanting to be with Mariah for a long time. They have an age gap, but it's a little one. She's 26, he's 32. So it's not like the age gap really factors in. But for her birthday, Luca and her brother take her to Vegas, and her friend is supposed to come with, but her friend can't come, and her and Luca end up getting drunk, she much more so than Luca, and they end up getting married in Vegas. And Luca, as I said, is not as drunk as her, and he fully knew what he was agreeing to. And so then they go back home and tell their parents, and their parents are like, you cannot get an annulment, it will be embarrassing, you need to stay married for 6 months, and then if it doesn't work, you can get a divorce. And Mariah's like, oh my God, I don't want him to be married to me just because of this. Whereas Luca's like, I'm going to win her over. She's going to be mine. So this was fun. It was hot. This is a pretty like low steam level one, in my opinion. I think I only gave this one a 2 actually on the spice scale. But it had a lot of other really great things going on. Like there is a point, the main trigger warning of this is that the heroine does get kidnapped at a point in here. There's no sexual assault, but she does get physically abused a lot, to the point where like she has some mobility issues now. Not like walking wise, but other body parts have mobility issues because of how much she is abused in this. And so there's a lot of caretaking that happens after this like torture of her, that was very swoony. Okay, it was very swoony stuff. And it was really beautiful. So I liked that. This one is definitely not my favorite though, just because honestly, like, it doesn't fit the, like, okay, besides the part where she's kidnapped, which is a very short part of the book, this read almost like a rom-com. Like, it literally read like a Vegas rom-com. And that just wasn't the tone that I was hoping for with this, especially because book 2 and 3 were such hits for me. You know, book 3 was a 6-star book for me. I loved it so much. So this one got a 4-star. It's a 2 on the spice scale. As I said, trigger warnings are for torture and PTSD. Now, if we want to talk about a kidnapping romance, let's talk about Mafia Madman by Mila Finelli. This came out on Tuesday. This is book 3 in the Kings of Italy, and this is the first book about Enzo and Gia. So Gia is the younger sister of Frankie from Mafia Mistress, and it has been 4 years since Enzo escaped from the clutches of Fausto. And if you have read books 1 and 2, you know that Enzo, he was not an angel. He did some bad stuff, but the equal and opposite and greater reaction that Fausto did to Enzo, in my opinion, was crazy. Okay, it was crazy. He was extremely mistreated because he was being tortured by Fausto. And it's been 4 years, and he's been trying to plan his revenge, and he happens to run across Gia when she is doing an internship so she's 20 now. She's doing an internship in Paris with a fashion designer, and he sees her, and he's like, I can't believe Fausto just left her unprotected like this. And so he kidnaps her and brings her to his yacht and strips her naked, puts her in a room, and is trying to decide what to do with her. And what does Gia do? Does she panic and freak out? No. She is the daughter of a mafia. So she starts doing fucking yoga. Okay? She starts doing yoga, showing off her jewelry that she has down below, giving a show for the cameras. If you're going to trap me in here, I'm going to make it so you can't look away. So these two go at it, okay? They go at it verbally, and eventually they're going at it physically. And he may be trying to dominate her, and she may be liking it. But this girl knows how to top from the bottom. There's literally a line that says that, where she's like, I may be on my knees for him, but I'm going to show him that I know how to top from the bottom. And I was like, girl, you're speaking my language. You're speaking to me. So this was a ride. This was great. I gave this one a 4.5 star because of just how we wrapped this one up. Like, this was a pretty good length novel, and I feel like he does have a good grovel, but I wish we would have had a little more, like, expanded with it, you know? And I think maybe that's part of the reason, like, we got 2 books with Fausto and Frankie, and I'm not saying this needed to be 2 books as well. Like, this story didn't need to be drawn out. This is perfect as one. But I wanted maybe another 20 pages of, like, how we were working everything out. Because if you're trying to work something out with, like, the daughter, like, the sister of your enemy, I don't think it's going to go this way. But that's okay. It's fantasy mafia. It's all right. It's all right. It was spicy. This was a 4.5 on the spice scale, okay? We were doing some fun things. There's a little bit of primal stuff going on. There is a little bit of dubcon, but she's mostly in for all of it. But there is some dubcon in some spaces. So just know that. But it was an adventure, okay? We had a good time. Okay, then I took a weird little sidetrack, and I saw someone's post on Instagram, and they posted this book, The Shield and the Thistle by Jill Bondarchuk. And this was a debut novel, and it had an audiobook, okay? There is The Shield and the Thistle and The Oath, and I haven't read The Oath yet, but I will be. But anyway, someone posted this, because when The Oath came out, I think, is when The Shield and the Thistle got a new cover, because it used to have one of those kind of like generic item covers for a fantasy, and then the author had these covers made, and I was like, holy shit. And it definitely has a explanation like Outlander. If you love Outlander, well, you might not love this, and I'll get into why. But if you just want like the Outlander vibes with a lot of the angst removed, and there isn't a spouse in the present time, and there isn't too much pushback from the people in the time she's traveling to, okay? So if you want Outlander, but you want the quick version, and you also just want it to be less angsty, this is going to be the book for you, okay? And I had a lot of fun with this. I did end up rating this 3.5, and again, I'm going to tell you why, but it was still a lot of fun, okay? I am not denying that. It also had duet narration for the audiobook, which if you don't know, that's when the woman does all the woman parts and the male does all the male voices, no matter whether, like, whose point of view the chapter is in, which I love. That's something that's the same way that all of the J.T. Geisinger books are done, so it's great. But this book has Maggie, who, it starts with her in New York. She's just been broken up with by her boyfriend, found out he's been seeing someone else, and he basically kicks her out of their apartment and she has nowhere to go. He's put all of her stuff in storage while she was gone for the day. Real jerk. So she calls her grandmother, who lives in Scotland, and she's like, Grandma, I don't know what to do. And she's like, honey, come stay with me. So she packs up and she goes to Scotland. And there is this, like, one of the days when she goes, like, sightseeing, she goes hiking, and she falls down a cave. Like, she falls down a hole in a cave. And when she emerges, she's in 17th century Scotland. So it's like 1600s. So there's no, like, Jacobite stuff. We're not, like, retreading that kind of ground or anything. But in the ways it's similar, right? She stumbles out and she stumbles into the arms of these men who are sex traffickers, by the way. So there is a trigger warning for that. It's a theme that comes up multiple times. And the author actually had, like, at the end, she had a note about sex trafficking. So it's obviously something that's very important to the author. So that to know. But anyway, she gets rescued by Colin. Are they McCull? They're not McCulloughs. That's Lydia Michaels. I can't remember the clan name. But either way, she gets rescued by him, and he kills the two men who are trying to take her. So she's just come from 2019. It's set in 2019 when she's in regular world. And so she's thinking, oh my God, this man just killed two people. And she's like, you killed them? And he's like, well, what else was I supposed to do? And so in her head, she's like, well, I'll tell the authorities these men were trying to rape me and he saved me and it'll be okay. And when she gets taken back, she gets brought to this estate. Like Colin takes her to this estate. And this is an estate that she had heard about because it still exists in her time. And so she thinks that these are all reenactments, which is a thought that usually happens in time travel. And then she figures it out pretty quickly. So that's the thing with this one. She figures it out pretty quickly. She then goes and she's going to try to go back, but she can't. And then she ends up staying. So this is one, though, like, she ends up telling Colin pretty quickly where she's from. It actually gets confirmed by, like, so this series is supposed to be like a fantasy series eventually, not only with the time travel, but there are witches in this. Like, there is magic. Like, magic is how we do. This isn't, again, this isn't like Outlander where, like, pretty much everything works the same except some people can time travel. No, like, there's definitely a lot more magic included. Outlander has other magic included too, but we still don't know how all that works, right? So anyway, this was really interesting. So then they end up where like, she decides to stay, and having told Colin the truth, like, he asked her to marry him, and she's like, well, I guess I can't leave. I'm going to stay here with Colin. So yeah, there's a lot of angst removed from it. Now, there are still some parts of it that are angsty because there is a plot that we get to at the end. But I think the big issue, and Jessen actually read this book as well. We were talking about it together because I found it and I was like, I'm just going to read this. I want to break from my TBR. I was feeling very tied down to my TBR at the moment, which happens to me sometimes when a mood reader is forced to follow a TBR. It happens. Anyway, we were talking, and the biggest issue was the pacing and the tension. Like, because she immediately tries to go back and it doesn't work, it's like we've just given up on it. And no one's preventing her from doing anything too, like in Outlander, every time Claire tries to do something, she gets stopped. And so it just builds up this tension where we're like, she can't do it. Also, there's nobody back in the time besides her grandma, who she does miss her grandmother, but it's not a partner, it's not a husband, it's not a boyfriend, you know, so there's nothing to keep her from falling for Colin once she decides to stay. And then, yeah, and then there's no tension that she's keeping a secret because she tells him right away. So anyway, I know I spoiled some of those points, but I'm just trying to explain why, like, there's so much about this book to love, and it was very fun, but also the author didn't do a great job keeping you, like, the only thing that kept me hooked is that the audiobook was good, and I was okay with a low angst book. Like, I think this would be kind of boring to anyone else who doesn't love the time period and this kind of story. You know what I mean? And maybe you do love, and then maybe you'll like, because this was on Kindle Unlimited and it had this $7 like audio upgrade, so it wasn't that much of a, you know, dive in. And I do really love the cover of the book, so I may still buy a physical copy because it's gorgeous. Now, however, so yeah, like I said, I gave this 3.5 stars, and it was a 2 on the spice scale. There are open door sex scenes, but they're very quick. They're very quick and not like overly detailed, which is fine. It definitely felt like this is someone's first book and they don't know how much spice they want to put in it. It definitely felt like that. But anyway, however, I did mention there was a second book. There's something that happens in this first one where we get a setup for the brother's book, because the brother is actually the laird of this. And he, in the second book, The Oath, makes a promise to that, which ends up helping Maggie and Colin, that basically sets him up for an arranged marriage with a witch. So like I said, witches are real. And he makes a deal that he's going to marry this witch and protect her. And it was the cost for her mother helping Maggie and Colin, because she doesn't want her daughter to be killed for being a witch, because that is still a threat. And Colin not being scared of the witch because of what he's seen goodness done. He's like, okay, well, so that's the setup for the second book. And that one is listed as it's a paranormal historical. Whereas like this one was like a fantasy historical because it had the time travel. This one's supposed to be a paranormal historical. And I'm intrigued. So I probably will read The Oath. And I think that one will have a better chance of me loving it because it won't have the time travel element or that parts. So, all right, then we have to talk about it. Okay, we have to talk about Before I Let Go. All right, see, I'm going to try to keep this concise, but we don't know about it. I have not even been able to write a review for this yet because I don't know how to articulate myself. And both Jesson and Crystal have read this book and talked about it, and I think they can be way more articulate than I. But what I bring to this and why I love second chance romance, I've mentioned this quite a few times, but my parents are a second chance romance. My parents are a couple who was married for 20 plus years and they got a divorce, and then 18 months later they reconciled, and their second time to the altar has been so much better. Like, honestly, there's so much that they worked through and that they've done and has made them both better people and better parents and better for each other, you know? So anyway, I believe in second chance romances, and I know some people don't. I know that, I mean, they don't always work for me either because I have a high standard, right? Like, I know the amount of work that had to go into my parents getting back together again. And for my parents, it had to do like a lot with like the alcoholism. My dad was an alcoholic for 30 years. And he's been sober for 7 now, which is amazing. But it was a lot. So I have a high standard for these. That being said, this book, this isn't coming out till November. Okay. So I'm sorry that I'm talking about it so early. I was going to wait, but I blame Jesson and Crystal because Crystal read it, which I totally understand. Kennedy Ryan's her favorite author. So I wouldn't wait, like, you know, I wouldn't wait to read one of Sophie's books when it drops, you know, I wouldn't do that. But she was reading it and I was like, oh, I want to read it. And then Jesson was starting it and I was like, okay, I have to read it because I don't want just them to be able to talk about it. I want to talk about it too. So I dived in. And I'm actually glad I had the push of like Jess and I were reading it at the same time to like keep me going, because this book, you guys, is agony. All right, I don't know another thing to tell you. The first 55% of this book was tearing my heart out, okay? It was tearing my heart out because we have these two people, Yasmin and Josiah, who are the love of each other's lives. And we get to see a little prologue of like when they were getting engaged and when they're starting their lives together. And they share a business together. They have a restaurant called Grits, and they are a very successful couple, and they run this business, and then they have a loss in their family. And the trigger warning, that is also a spoiler for this, but I'll be honest, like, number one, again, telling trigger warnings should never be a spoiler, but also this book is so much more than what the plot point is. You know, it's about these two people, how they work it out and how they work on themselves and their mental health and their communication skills. Like, literally, that's what it's about, you know? Because these people are already madly in love. They are so in love. And that's what makes this agonizing. Okay, let me continue. The trigger warning for this is loss of a child from, like, an accident, okay? So I'm going to tell you because it's traumatic. And Kennedy Ryan never dwells on the event. Like, we know there was the loss of a baby, then we know that it's a loss of, like, the child was stillborn, and then we know that it was you know, like, those pieces are revealed. Like, we always know that there's a loss of this child, and that's what broke them up. And it's as we go in, we get to see deeper into like how traumatic this was and why these people are grieving the way that they are. And that's what makes it hurt. It hurts because we grieve differently. And when our partner or our loved one is doing it differently than us, and it makes us feel insufficient, or we think there's something insufficient about how they're grieving, it just puts us as enemies when we should be together. Well, not enemies, but like on different when we should be together and just working through it. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's the airplane is crashing and you must see to your own survival first, you know? And it doesn't matter how much you love that person. You just gotta do it, you know? And Kennedy Ryan, I've said this to, like, you know I love her. I love her, okay? Her books move me in ways that I don't always want to be moved, you know? I would just want to be like, oh, I just want this to be beautiful, but it's so real. And that's the thing. It's so real that it's not going to work for everybody. Because, yeah, we go to books for escapism. I say that all the time. The number one way, like the first way that I rate a book is how much enjoyment I get from it. And then I look at everything else, like, after that, you know, like, how well it's written and, you know, how believable. Like, those things come second and third and fourth to me. But with Kennedy, she brings those other things up, you know, she brings those up. And the way that she just effortlessly pulls you in, like, this whole book read like a movie. And I said, in one of my, like, I posted about it on Instagram, I was like, if this film isn't a movie within the next 5 years, Hollywood has fucking lost it. Because this, and I don't mean this as a cliche or to say it just because it's a black couple, but, like, Tyler Perry could make this movie and it would be brilliant with the people he found to be in it and everything. Like, literally, it was like watching one of the very emotional, like, Tyler Perry movies, you know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh, I love every character in this story, and there's no bad guy in here, okay? But watching this couple who, you know that they weren't supposed to be apart, and you see them with other people. We don't sexually see them with other people. So thank you, Kennedy, for not doing that, because there's a couple times where I was like, if you show me sex between the like, I'm gonna die. You know, like, we do know that it happens and it's there and it burns. It burns. It burns. But again, what made this so real to me is I saw this happen in real life. And my dad, he didn't want to be alone. He'd been divorced for a year and he started dating. And he started dating someone, and my mom, who only really got divorced because, well, not only, but like, again, my dad was an alcoholic and she was tired of that game and going around, and she just thought being alone and not having to like worry about his decisions or what he was doing, like she just wanted to be separate from it. But when my dad started trying to move on and dating people, my mom, like, it woke her up, and she's like, you know, I'm never going to love anyone else while he's alive, while he's here, and honestly only living a mile and a half away, because my dad was living with his mother, which is only a mile and a half away from our home. So, and that is so similar to this book, because Josiah's only living like a couple doors down so that he can still like be co-parenting together. And they were so beautiful how they co-parented. Like, honestly, they were a united front, and sometimes there would be things they were like bickering about with the kids, but they wouldn't do it in front of the kids, and they just were doing their best, and it wasn't working, you know? And anyway, I don't want to spiral through and spoil every little bit of this, because that's not what this is about. But the main like trigger warnings for is this is agony for your soul, because you see these two beautiful people and nobody's the villain, but also what was another way they could do it? You know, what else was going to happen? You know, we need mental health. I love how therapy was used in this story. It's never used enough. It was just so well done. I'm going to move on now, because the way I've talked about it, the way you'll see other people talk about it, if you're intrigued, if you're going to trust Kennedy, oh, that's where I was going with this. My main thing that I kept telling Jesson and Crystal is that if any other author, maybe besides Pam Godwin, but she doesn't quite write this level of like believable pain. She writes more of like dark romance pain, you know what I mean? But if any other author in a contemporary novel was trying to put me through this, I would call it emotional manipulation, and I would have DNF'd, because I don't want to go through this. I don't. But what I know in my soul about Kennedy Ryan is that she makes the journey painful, but the destination and the HEA feels like... It feels like the sun breaking through the worst storm you've ever lived through. It feels like the lighthouse on the hill after you've made it through the waves crashing down and you've been drowning, and you're like, there it is, there's the shore. It's going to be so good when we're there. And so no other author would I let take me on that boat ride, because I wouldn't trust them. I was like, we're going to end up at the bottom of the ocean. It's not going to work. But Kennedy gets me there, and it's beautiful. So we're going to be done with that now, because either you're going to want to go on that painful journey I've explained because you trust Kennedy, or you don't. And absolutely, that's a legit feeling, okay? Because this book is borderline traumatic for the agony of turning the page. But the payoff is good, and it's earned. Like, these people don't just wake up and they're like, I'm so sorry for the things I said or how I did this and I'm done with it. Like, no, they have to earn every inch, and I believe it. And when we're standing at the other side of it, it's like, yeah, that's how you're supposed to do it. So anyway, all right, I just have one more book to talk about, and I'm going to be really quick about this one, because number one, I feel so bad for this book that it had to come after that one. Like, let's just acknowledge that. You see this happening, and then I read this book, and there is some things I'll nitpick, but overall, like, I love this author and the story she tells. But this book just, you know, it suffered a bit in comparison, which I knew was going to happen. And I wish I hadn't have had to read another arc right after it, because then I could have read kind of a throwaway book, you know, but I didn't. I read The Consigliere by Serena Ackroyd. This book comes out on the 18th. This is book 1 in a duet, which is part of a series, which is part of the world that is the 5 Points Mafia world. So this book is about Aurora and Hunter. Aurora is the sister and the consigliere. Yes, it's a female consigliere, which if you don't know what that is, it's the second in command to a mafia don. So Lucio, however we say his name, he is the don from like the Don and the Lady, you know, and his sister Aurora is his consigliere. She's also a DA. And her and Hunter have been friends / he's been obsessed with her for a very long time. Aurora had a marriage previously with someone who was her husband and master. And master as in like she wanted him to be her master because she is a pain slut. And I'm not saying that derogatory. That's what she calls herself. That's what it is when in BDSM like you are a masochist to such a degree that you really want your master to like go to town on you all the time. And she was in that, but it was starting to get abusive because she couldn't trust her husband to listen to her safe words anymore. He was going from, you know, the things she would let him do to her, like she was okay with, but it was starting to go too far and he wasn't listening when she would tap out. And that's no longer BDSM anymore. That is now rape. Because whether you are doing when you're doing consensual non-consent, which can be a part of BDSM, and you don't listen to someone's safe word, you are now raping them. And that had happened to her. But her husband is dead in this book, and Hunter has always been a family friend, and like they grew up together, and he has always wanted her. But she hasn't given him the time of day, and she's very much kept him at a distance because she knew the kinds of kinks she had, and she saw Hunter as too passive and that he would never be a dom, and so she just always wrote him off. And there is a scenario when when her husband is still alive, that he actually walks in on one of their scenes, and you know she's looking pretty rough during this scene, and so she is very ashamed that he saw her in this condition, and so she very much stays away from him. Meanwhile, it makes Hunter want to learn more about BDSM and see if he could be a dom, because he doesn't know. He doesn't know if he is, and it ends up wakening him up. So long story long, we did not shorten this down. He has, over the years, learned that he does like being a dom. And he actually has an online sub where he has a sub who she will do the punishments like to herself. And he will like have her like wear toys and then like film it. And so he's able to be this person's dom like through the internet. And they've never met in person because his sub hides her identity, and so he assumes she's someone high, like he's like she probably works for the government or is like in a job where she doesn't want people to know. Well, of course it is, because of course the person that he is dominating is Aurora. Aurora, after the debacle that was her first marriage with her husband who became abusive, she wanted to be in an anonymous relationship. So she found a dom online, which happened to be Hunter, who was testing out if he wanted to be a dom using online, and they were actually a long-term partnership. But Hunter has always wanted to be with Aurora. So he breaks up with his sub, who is Aurora, because he wants to date Aurora in real life. So you can see how this is a confusing setup. So I'm going to stop here. That's the setup. This book, though, 60% of the book was mafia politics, them communicating online, digs at real politics and commenting on the state of the world, which I do not like my books in this scenario to tip over into that, because I'm sorry, you work in the fucking mafia, you don't get to judge people's lives. Just saying. And I don't love when authors do that. But I love Serena Ackroyd, and the spice, the kind of dom, when these people finally like know about the other person and they're together, it was hot. Like, it was friggin' hot. And there was that. But 60% of this book was all stuff that involved the Sinner series and the 5 Points Mob and then the earlier books. So Serena Ackroyd doesn't have any books that can be read as standalones anymore, and I don't like the Sinners series and I don't read those. And so the first half of the book, she has to re-explain stuff in case there's people who skipped books, and it just gets drawn out for me. So I gave this book 4 stars. It is a 4.5 on the spice scale. The second half of the duet was pushed back a month because Serena was actually, she had COVID and she had a loss in her pet family, which is very sad. And so it got pushed back a month, which is good. Like, I'm going to finish the duet, and we'll see how it goes. So yeah, the trigger warnings are domestic abuse, self-harm, and a BDSM relationship that is non-consensual. So it's not BDSM anymore. So anyway, I told you I'd still be able to talk for an hour about 8 books. A lot of them are new and or aren't out yet, and I liked most of them, you know. So highly recommend. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you if you support my channel. Check out my links down below if you would like to help support. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, friends. Bye.